Let me talk about window states now. The three windows which you see on the screen now could best be called normal windows. Let me compare these normal windows to some other windows. First, in the upper right-hand corner of these windows, you see these two icons, an up arrow and a down arrow. Let's click on the up arrow to see what happens. When we click on the up arrow, the window that I clicked in has now taken up the full size of the screen. This is called the maximize operation. The other windows are still there. The applications are still running. You can imagine that those applications are running behind this window. They're still active, but they're not visible. You might also notice that the maximize icon has been replaced by a double arrow. This double arrow is called the restore icon. Let's click on that. And you can see that what happens is that the window is restored to its previous state. Now naturally, if the up arrow is the maximize icon, the down arrow is the minimize icon. Clicking on the minimize icon changes a window to its smallest possible size. Now, we do call these icons, which is somewhat of an overused word and somewhat of an abused word. This icon is really just like any other window. The application is told that it's being minimized, and it can decide to do what it wants. In this case, the MS-DOS executive decides to simply display this graphical representation of itself, a disk. However, the clock application, when you minimize it, does something different. It continues to draw in its window as it does when it's a normal window. If you stare at the minute hand there long enough, at least for a minute, you will in fact notice that the minute hand continues to operate. There is another mouse operation that I haven't used, which is effected by double-clicking. The double-clicking operation executes the default command. The default command differs depending on where you're clicking. For instance, if we double-click on a minimized application, the default command says restore the window to its previous size. Okay? In the MS-DOS executive, however, if we click on a file name, the default command is something different. If we double-click on a subdirectory, it says open the subdirectory. If we double-click on a program, if I can find a program, it implies that the program should be executed. Now this might not seem very clear because the operation of the default command depends on where you're clicking. In general, however, the default operation always implies something along the lines of open a directory, open a window, execute a program. The only exception to this is when you double-click on the control icon. Double-clicking on the control icon implies a close the application. If we double-click there, the clock program gets terminated. So these are the different states that Windows can be in. The simple commands that I've demonstrated, namely the view long and view short command in the MS-DOS executive, are somewhat simple examples just because they don't need any further information. You select view long, the MS-DOS executive shows you the file system in the long format. View short does the same thing in the short format. In most cases, however, doing a command often requires additional information. For instance, if I wanted to save this memo that I wrote in the Microsoft Write application, I would select the File Save command. Now you'll notice these dots after the Save command. This implies that something additional is going to happen. Let's select the command and see what happens. What's happened is this other window has appeared. This window is called the dialog box. A dialog box, even though it appears a lot like a window, belongs to another window. This dialog box belongs to the right application. It's up temporarily. It's a form that you fill out to provide additional information to be able to complete a command. A dialog box can contain a variety of controls inside it. Controls are things like text, an edit box. An edit box is a place where you can type and do some editing operations. You can backspace, you can mark text and delete it, and so forth. Other controls are things like checkboxes. Watch what happens when I click on a checkbox. You can turn the option on, or you can turn it off. Other controls visible here are buttons. When you press on a button, that effects an operation. I selected the save command. The MSWrite application saved the memo in that file name and took away the dialog box because all the information was retrieved. The dialog box is no longer needed. There are some other controls that are useful in dialog boxes. For instance, let's use the file open command to see a different dialog box. The file open command uses something called a list box. A list box shows you all of the options that are available and lets you select one. Let me do something here to show you more options. Here in this case, the list box is showing you all of the files that are available in that directory. Beside the list box, there's something else called a scroll bar. The scroll bar is another kind of control that lets you move throughout the list box to find the item that you're looking for. You can click on the arrows, or you can click on what's called the thumb to move randomly up and down throughout the list box. You can also page up and page down by clicking alongside the thumb. So, having located the item that we're looking for, you can simply click on the item and press open. There's a variety of other controls. I'll point them out as we move through the different applications that I'll be showing. Incidentally, controls can also be used outside a dialog box. For instance, you'll notice that the right application makes use of scroll bars in its main window. So controls are useful not only for dialog boxes, but also for regular windows as well. I've talked about the low-level details of the user interface, how to execute commands, how to move windows about. There are some higher-level components that I'd like to discuss now. First of all, the MS-DOS executive is an integral part of the Microsoft Windows user interface because it's how the user interacts with the file system. The user can copy files, delete them, rename them. He can execute programs. He can traverse his file system structure. In the Presentation Manager, there will also be a similar program. It'll be called the user shell, and it'll have considerably more capability, but it'll play pretty much the same role. It'll be the user's main user interface for dealing with the file system. Another important program is the control panel. In Microsoft Windows, the control panel is this program here, control.exe. Let's run it and see what its role is. The control panel is a housekeeping program that lets you control a variety of functions. For instance, you can set the time of your system. You can set the date of your system. You can install printer drivers, install fonts, select what printer you want to talk to. Another set of functions that it can perform is to control a lot of the user interface preferences. For instance, if you're left-handed, you may want to switch the operation of the left and right buttons on the mouse. Another thing you might want to do is to change the colors of the system. If you don't like the green background, for example, you can switch it to blue by using the control panel. You can see how the system is changed. Another function of the control panel is to set the border width you'll have noticed that windows all have these gray borders around them. These gray borders used to resize a window are what's prompted many press people to call this ugly windows. Well, if you don't like that border that's 5 units wide, you can change it. That's my favorite. Or if you don't like them at all, you can always make them very small to keep them out of the way.